2023, a year of new boats, new plans and new debates.
Housing, the economy, health services were, and again, because we're spending so much time debating this subject of the bishop, that is leading to the public feeling disenfranchised.
If they had not acted in the way that they acted and put our most vulnerable customers at risk, then the government would not be acting in the way and manner that it is today.
Now, with our calendars on the final page, join me, Lewis Foster.
And me, Siobhan Fletcher.
As we take a look back on some of the biggest news stories and talking points on the Isle of Man over the past 12 months. So it's always hard looking back over a year and thinking what has been the biggest news story of the year. What defines it as the biggest news story? Is it its impact it's had on the Manx public or just generally being a big talking point?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because obviously we're in the newsroom all day, every day, and there are definitely stories that crop up again and again and ongoing debates. You know, we had assisted dying legislation going through Keys and Tynwald this year. We had work permits. That seems to always crop up. COVID is still kind of rumbling on in the background.
The C word.
The C word. But yeah, there's, you know, but then at the same time, do we judge it by what we get the biggest reaction to on things like social media? Mm-hmm. Obviously, post playing, we lost that this year. That's had a lot of comment. People sending a letter in Douglas and it taking 5 days to get to Peel, things like that. So yeah, it's hard to define the biggest story of the year. But
looking back, there are plenty of things. And obviously, the Manxman, one of the biggest stories of the year, the arrival of the Steam Packet's new boat into Douglas. And we'll take a look back at that shortly. But I wanted to start, I've put together this package looking at some of the strikes and union action we've seen this year. Teachers, nurses and the threat from seafarers with the Steam Packet.
Schools across the island have asked numerous year groups to stay at home today. Members of the NASUWT, the teachers' union, are striking for 2 days in an ongoing dispute over pay, workload and working practices.
Teachers' pay has been either frozen or gone up by 1% and has fallen way behind.
It's a little disappointing, actually, to be sitting here with strike action imminent when we made an offer on Friday to suspend tomorrow's action.
3 o'clock and time for the latest news now with Siobhan Fletcher. Faster my, Siobhan.
Faster my. Teachers on the Isle of Man will not strike tomorrow. The NASUWT, the teachers' union, has confirmed to Manx Radio that industrial action will be suspended.
It's enabled us to avoid continued action today. I think that's the right approach. It's a collaborative way forward and we have to continue these discussions with the union.
Is the department just giving in then?
No, certainly not. We've always kept our door open to further talks, but if a new proposal comes forward or a slight alteration, it's right. I think we should look at these and go back to the union with, anything that can resolve this dispute. It's been going on so long.
Relationships between teaching unions and the Education Department on the Isle of Man have improved. That's according to the Minister, as schools prepare for the start of the new academic year tomorrow. More than 250 teaching staff downed tools over 3 days in the last school year, calling for better pay and improved staff retention. However, Julie Edge says talks are progressing between the NASUWT and her department.
My aim is to make sure that we've got that stability in our classrooms. There has been some challenges, but I do feel that there is light at the end of that. We will work with our unions and make sure that it's a proper collaborative approach to education on the island to make sure that our young people have got the best opportunities.
No matter where we go, brush your teeth and write your name on the bottom of a...
With teachers, things became quiet as the year progressed. Come July, though, and a row between the Royal College of Nursing and Manx Care would come to a head.
High time for nurses to be valued here in the Isle of Man. The importance of the people working in the industry is not just the fair pay, but for the safety of the patient and the staff as well.
We have to be heard. We are so short-staffed, and the cost of living, the rate of inflation, it's really, really hard for people to live in this day and age on the island.
The Manx Care is carrying a vacancy rate of around 20% across the piece. If you're saying, well, we need to pay our existing staff more, you can't then spend that same money hiring more nurses to fill the vacancies. So it's a difficult message to get across, I think, and it's difficult when people are saying both, we need more funding for us, but also we'd like more people employed. Actually, sometimes you can't do both, and you can't do both at the same time quickly. I'd love to be able to snap my fingers and say, yes, Treasury, give me extra money, and the reality is I can't do that. And we have to then rely on Manx Care to negotiate with staff to make sure Manx Care are taking all the steps they can take to improve staff morale, make staff feel valued, improve staff well-being, improve staff numbers, and ultimately improve staff pay.
There has been money set out for a Nurses' Pay Award. One of the issues is the historical agreements with nurses, because they go back not just the last financial year, but the financial year before that. And so there has been an offer on the table which has been accepted by a lot of the other health worker unions and their membership. So there is money there. They will get a pay increase, but they've made the case that they need more. They've also made the case in terms of terms and conditions, particularly working conditions. And we're working very closely from a Treasury perspective with the Department of Health and Social Care to make sure that we can deal with some of those issues like recruitment, like the way nurses are treated on the Isle of Man, to make this the best place to work in the British Isles.
Describe your day-to-day with staffing levels as they are. Quite stressful?
Extremely stressful, and theatre lists are being cancelled on a daily basis because there aren't the staff to enable the theatre cases to go ahead. It's unsafe at the moment, and the only way it's going to become safer is if you attract the staff by getting a better wage packet, and then you're going to get people coming over. But the minute you can't recruit, you can't retain.
Listening there to Sarah must echo what your day-to-day is like.
Very much so. Too often I go home at the end of a very long shift crying because I've only been able to give the basic care to my patients, and it's not right.
5 o'clock, time for the latest news now with Siobhan Fletcher. Faster my, Siobhan.
Faster my. Treasury has approved additional funds to facilitate a new pay offer for nurses from Manx Care. Members of the Royal College of Nursing had been due to strike for 2 days next week in a row over pay and working conditions. That industrial action has now been paused while the revised offer is considered. It's a move Chief Executive of Manx Care, Teresa Cope, says has been welcomed on all sides.
Yesterday we were able to put a revised offer on the table to the Royal College of Nursing, which has enabled them to consider taking that through their membership, and during that time have agreed to pause the industrial action which has been planned. That's clearly welcome from all sides.
So we can confirm this evening that nurses on the Isle of Man have voted to accept the latest pay offer from Manx Care.
The current deal is covering a 2-year period, but the increase we've seen in this recent deal, which was originally 6%, is 6% plus a £1,500 consolidated pay award. I think the reason that members have moved to a point to accept that offer is that through increments we've reached an offer that satisfies most of our membership, and in this case satisfied over 70% of those that voted. So I think it's due to an incremental increase reaching a point which members feel is a reasonable offer.
From nurses to another lifeline service, now the Isle of Man steam packet. Throughout the year, we've seen tensions boiling between the company and seafarers' union Nautilus.
Steam packet employees could be the next workers to go on strike as talks around rotas appear to be reaching crisis point. Maritime trade union Nautilus has confirmed it's currently balloting members over industrial action after the company is said to have declined to negotiate its terms and conditions.
The company wrote to us on the 21st of October 2021, giving us notice to negotiate Live on Board. We've had numerous meetings over the past 2 years since then. In those meetings, despite telling us that Live on Board was to be negotiated, they've actually verbally told us that it was non-negotiable.
There is a very clear demarcation with the steam packet. They are a private company that is owned by the Isle of Man people, but is responsible for its own terms and conditions and negotiations with its staff.
A maritime trade union says industrial action is an option and they've got a mandate from members to ballot for it. Negotiations between Nautilus and the steam packet company have hit an impasse.
The unions are accusing the ferry company of using bullying tactics and repeatedly claim what the packet are planning, should members not sign new contracts for living on board, are fire and rehire tactics.
We've sort of reached a point where we've offered everything we can offer.
But is the bugbear pay here?
It appears to be. Our initial understanding of the dispute was that they had members who didn't want to live aboard. Now that appears to not be the case, because a recent press release from Nautilus said that living aboard wasn't an issue. It seems like they want to squeeze as much money out of the company as possible.
The steam packet is so important to the island. Is it possible for you to up your offer?
No, it's really not. We feel as if we're sort of being held to ransom, if you like. They want to put the island under siege.
But at the end of the day, 1st of January, we're faced with the possibility of the boats not sailing because of action. The island will suffer.
The island will suffer, absolutely. And Nautilus, being a UK-based union, that seems to be lost on them.
Well, there we go. That was a sort of brief look at all the unrest we've had this year on the island. Lewis, you've kind of been the live man this year. You've done a lot of lives into breakfast for us. You've been down on the picket line, as we probably heard there. You know, you've been out and about a lot. Tesco doing a Vox, I remember that. I was on bulletins that day. Post ShopRite sale. Another big one, I think, for you. You covered kind of the Manxman on its first voyage. How was that?
So this wasn't the Manxman's actual arrival into Douglas Bay. That happened several weeks prior, but this was the morning of its first passenger sailing, and it was delayed, actually, by, I think, around half an hour. I can't remember quite how much, but it meant coming back and forth into the breakfast show that morning. But, shall I take... Yeah, let's do it. Let's address the big boat in the bay, the Manxman. The steam packet's flagship vessel arrived earlier this year. Let's have a look back to that time.
She's 133 metres long. She's the largest steam packet vessel.
It'd be nice to see her and see the fanfare coming in.
I'm totally amped. It's going to be absolutely amazing.
I used to have a boat myself, and so I get the nautical side of things and the excitement, especially about the engineering side of it as well.
Oh, adieu to you, my Dinah, 1,000 times.
Home is the sailor, home from the sea, and the Manxman is home at last.
I want to congratulate the Chairman, Lars Ugland, and the Board for the excellent manner in which they have conducted operations since the government purchased the company in 2018. This is clearly demonstrated today by the arrival of the Manxman to our shores, on time and on budget. It has been no small task and has required extensive thought, planning and oversight. Thank you, Lars, your colleagues on the board, and indeed the executive team. You have done an incredible job.
It's chalk and cheese compared to the Ben. The Ben's been a workhorse, done a fantastic job over the years, but the Manxman's just going to bring a whole new level of passenger comfort and pleasure for that journey.
The Manxman, yeah, there we go. Finally, after 25 minutes delay, we can see she's finally getting underway out here. There's plenty of wash coming up into the harbour and slowly pulling away. The culmination of all that work from 2019 as well. 590 passengers on board, ready to depart for Heysham. Expected to arrive there at 12:30. I wonder if they'll make up time along the journey.
It's just magnificent that we're actually getting a new vessel that can rely on.
That was a good toot, that. I mean, the Manxman is still very much a talking point, all the way up to this last week, running up to Christmas, when we had all that travel disruption caused by the high winds, the severe gales. With any luck, I'll be over in the UK with my Christmas plans well underway, but may well not be, had the weather got the better of me. Who knows? That's all looking in the future, and we're looking back at the same time.
Yeah, but never fear, dear listener, if he's stuck here, I'll make sure he's well fed on Christmas Day. So here in the newsroom then, we get to meet and sit down with some fascinating people. occasionally the job as a reporter will see you respond and dispatch to events happening in the here and now. We talked about lives and you heading out and doing a few lives this year.
There's been quite a few incidents this year. When I did put together the news review of 2022, there wasn't actually as many breaking stories, I don't think. Certainly not as many as we had this year. Let's have a listen back to a few of them throughout 2023 and how they had to be negotiated live on air.
Emergency services are dealing with an incident in Port Eyre, and joining me live in the studio is Tessa Hawley. Tessa, what do we know?
So police have told us they're dealing with an incident near Bradder Head, but at this stage they haven't confirmed what's happened. We do know that there has been a huge turnout from emergency services personnel. Photos and videos of the scene down there are being shared. They do show smoke billowing from behind Milner's Tower.
Hopefully we can now go live down to Port Eyre, where our reporter Chanel Saku is at the moment. Chanel, what can you tell us?
Hi Dave, yeah, there's a helicopter out here. There's two, I can see two vessels, two lifeboats or coast guards here. I spoke to one of the residents who said that she heard a bang and saw some smoke. And she was kind enough to loan me her binoculars to look through. And if I was looking up at the Bradder Head area, I could see about 8 to 10 personnel right on the top by the building, and I can also see some emergency vehicles at the top near the Bradder Glen area as well.
The area around QE2 High School in Peel has been cordoned off following an incident which is thought to involve both the school and Peel Castle. There's no details at present as to what the incident might be, but just after 4 o'clock, students were told to leave their classrooms and to get as far away from the school as possible. Emergency services arrived soon after and placed police tape around the grounds. There are also unconfirmed reports that armed police are at the school. Our head of news, Beth Espy, is at the scene at Peel Castle.
Standing just near the bridge in Peel, and there are police officers on either side. You can see police cars and a number of officers just blocking off the entrance to Fenella car park. Naturally, a lot of people standing around watching what's going on. We can hear the bridge alarm going. I understand they have been letting boats into the harbour. They were keeping them outside of the harbour for a little while. There's no indication from the officers standing here about exactly what the nature of the incident is, but it has been going on for some time now, and it's very quiet around Peel Castle, which isn't usual on a day which is as beautiful as this.
Garth commissioners are calling for urgent action to stabilise cliffs above the former End Cafe site in Laxey Promenade after a landslide earlier this week.
We've had a succession of landslips that have brought quite a bit of the cliffside down now. The concern has now become that the houses, and particularly one property at the top, and the highway itself.
Residents in 2 properties in Laxey have been advised to evacuate following a landslide over the weekend. Garth Commissioners says the houses on Old Laxey Hill have also been disconnected from services by Islands Energy and Manx Utilities as a precaution.
Police are dealing with an ongoing incident in Douglas. Armed officers are on the scene on Lower Dukes Road. Manx Radio's Lewis Foster is there.
The road's been blocked off for about an hour now, and more police cars are arriving as we speak. Some of them unmarked as well, but you could see police officers behind the wheel. I've seen armed police go by as well in the last few moments.
The Isle of Man Constabulary says it will issue a media release in due course.
So that's just a glimpse of how some of those incidences throughout the year were negotiated live on air, and trying to handle them as sensitively as possible. Of course, you never know what exactly is fully involved in a situation like that, so always best to handle with caution.
Yeah, and alongside that kind of breaking news, we have those stories that rumble on. We mentioned them earlier, some of them. I think a big one for me this year was the assisted dying debate. Now, in October, I believe it was on Hop Tune Nay, they had a big debate in Tynwald about this, and it rumbled on for several hours, and I was listening across it. I was kind of the chosen one in the newsroom to listen across.
It felt like one of the heftiest debates we've had in a long time.
Yeah, really so, and very much had to really pay attention and listen to what was going on. Everyone had different, viewpoints, and what I will say is I think it shone a light on kind of the best of our island's parliament, really. I think that they were all very respectful of the difference in opinions. They all presented the cases, as it were, in a very respectful way, and everyone, it was that level of respect, I think, that really shone through.
And you've dived into the into the archives to have a look at how that debate unfolded. So let's have a listen.
In October, politicians voted in favour of proceeding with introducing legislation which would help terminally ill people seek assistance to end their own lives. The bill has proceeded to the clauses stage where the finer details are being hashed out. It followed an extensive 6-hour debate in the House of Keys, which Manx Radio broadcast in full. 17 members ultimately voted in favour, with 7 voting against. The politician behind the assisted dying bill is Ramsey MHK Alex Allinson.
This process of debate, scrutiny, amendment and agreement is crucial to our democracy. It allows the public to see us making decisions on their behalf, reflecting their opinions and representing their views. The principle of this bill is that certain adult island residents who are terminally ill should be able to request specific assistance to decide when and how they might die.
It was, of course, by its very nature, a divisive debate, and the first opportunity that MHKs had to discuss at length the main principles of the bill. Oncan MHK Rob Collister tabled a motion to have the bill referred to a committee of 5 members to consider and report by the end of February, which was later approved. Elsewhere, he highlighted concerns about what he described as death tourism.
I am concerned that the Isle of Man will start to see people moving to the island in the last 2 or 3 or 4 years of their lives in order to take advantage of this particular bill, especially if the Isle of Man was to introduce this legislation ahead of England and Wales. That will certainly put a significant strain on the Isle of Man health and social care services. And therefore I feel one of 2 things must happen. Either we table an amendment to the draft legislation which changes the residency period of not less than 1 year to a residency period of not less than 5 years, in order to ensure that any legislation around assisted dying is for Isle of Man residents only, and to ensure that the island is not labelled as a death tourism location in the future.
Garth MHK's Andrew Smith and Daphne Kane had opposing opinions on their support for the bill, with the latter saying it was the clauses stage which would provide the proper place for debate. Mrs Kane also called on others not to compare this to suicide.
Likening this, comparing this with the suicide prevention strategy and suicides of young, healthy people, I fundamentally disagree with. Every suicide is a tragedy. Healthy people having mental health or other issues should not be conflated with assisted dying legislation to assist the terminally ill or to relieve unbearable suffering.
Arbury, Castletown and Maloo MHKs Jason Morehouse and Tim Glover appeared to share the same lack of support for the bill, with the latter saying there was no need to rush it, a sentiment echoed by Peel and Glen Faber MHK Kate Lord Brennan.
We're being asked to support something today which, if we're truthful, we don't know or have control of where it might end up, and that really worries me. We will be opening that can of worms. The genie will be out of the bottle and will be nigh on impossible to put back. Members of this House change, governments change, and priorities also do. There will be cases that will be challenged in court, and maybe the following ensuing political clamour could lead to changes to the terms of what is undeniably a well-intentioned bill. We can't control that for the future, though.
The sense I'm getting is just say yes today and we'll sort out the rest of the detail later. It will go wrong and we won't be able to do it. So the best thing is to just say no to second reading today, and let's focus for the people of the Isle of Man on the things that we really need to do well and effectively and confidently.
In contrast, Douglas North MHK's David Ashford and John Wannenberg said that whilst they had concerns about safeguarding in certain areas, this provided the opportunity to make progressive change.
A privilege, as we have in our grasp, the ability to progress the single greatest act of compassion that we can bestow. A responsibility in that we must eliminate any possibility of an injustice being committed through inadequate safeguards. This is too important to get wrong. The issues are deep and have already divided the island community. For many, this is a battle of heart and mind.
This bill is something that quite rightly ignites passions on both sides of the argument.
Whatever decision this Honourable House ultimately makes, it will please or upset people probably in equal measure. While we in this Honourable House can't put ourselves in others' shoes, what we can do is ensure that any legislation is fit for purpose, and ours is the duty to decide if any such legislation is fit for purpose or indeed workable.
Meanwhile, Aaron Michael MHK Alfred Cannon rose to make his opinion clear, saying legislators should not be playing God.
Because by determining the answer to the question, can I legally end my own life, is yes, then in my view it matters not what framework is put around the circumstances. If we determine the basic fundamental right that you can legally end your own life, then who are we to judge in what circumstances that should be? Who are we to consider whether pain, mental or physical suffering is manageable or not? Who are we to judge whether or not you should suffer years of debilitating rheumatoid arthritis or live with your serious disabilities? Who are we to judge that you can end your suffering without it having significantly impacted on you, but in the knowledge that it most certainly will? Who will we be now to judge who can and who cannot avail themselves of what is a right we are today only proposing to give to a select few? We will now have the potential to become experts in playing God with other people's lives.
And it's a debate that certainly divided opinion outside of the island's parliament as well. Out on the streets, members of 3 different groups were making their voices heard ahead of the sitting. Amy Griffiths went out to speak to them.
Morning. So there's a big crowd gathered here, and it seems to be that there are people from all sides of the argument, because it really is a hugely emotive topic. We have people here with signs saying, "My dad deserved the choice," and people's names, and people saying, "Bin the bill," and they're banging their bin the bill drums. And there we go, right on cue. Thank you. So first of all, I'm going to come to Vicky here. And Vicky, you're from How We Die Matters. Well, you think How We Die matters. Can you just explain your views for me, please?
I would like everybody to have the choice of how they die and when they die. We know that there are lots of people for whom palliative care doesn't work, and we would like them to have the opportunity to have a dignified death of their choice at a time that they choose.
And why is it something that's so passionate to you?
Well, A, because I'm fairly old, I'm getting on a bit, and I would like that choice for myself. But we know that palliative care, although it works, and we've got a wonderful hospice here, and we don't take anything away from them at all, but palliative care doesn't work for everybody. And what we'd really like to, for My Death, My Decision, are campaigning for the assisted dying legislation to cover people who have long-term illnesses which are causing them intolerable suffering, like people with motor neurone disease, for instance. So we'd like everybody to have that choice.
Thank you, Vicky. And I'll come over here to Ben. You have a massive green bin that you've been walking up and down and banging, saying, "Bin the bill." Why do you think this shouldn't go through?
Firstly, it's the vulnerable. The rights for some person will make somebody else vulnerable, because you can't spot coercion and manipulation. And not only that, but we'll lose health care. If the residency requirement is a year, that's going to bring loads of people over from the UK. If we go ahead of the UK, our services will collapse under the pressure. If we abolish the residency requirement, we'll become known as Death Island. So there's quite a few big issues with this bill.
In terms of safeguarding, though, there is a very narrow criteria of people that are eligible. And the member proposing the bill, Dr. Alex Allenson, he says there's no chance of that being expanded. It's not within the legislation. So would that still be a concern?
Well, it would, because across the world, wherever health services provide assisted dying, every barrier has come down. Barriers have fallen in every jurisdiction where the health services provide assisted dying. In Oregon, the residency requirement's gone. In Canada, they've extending it next March to mental illness. I think of Stephen Hawking. He was diagnosed with motor neurone disease, and then he lived for years and years afterwards. If he'd chosen to die, what a disaster that would have been. Prognosis is so often wrong. Don't let doctors or nurses kill people behind closed doors. It would be potentially disastrous, really.
Don't you think people in that situation should be entitled to their own choice, though?
The problem is that my choice affects somebody else's vulnerability. So, I might want it for myself, and could conceivably be suffering at the end of life. I mean, palliative care, obviously, is fantastic. We have the best palliative care on the Isle of Man. Even if you even if you're, terribly anxious, you can be sedated, and asleep. But the key thing is that doctors always want to try and protect your life. Of course, not that you shouldn't allow people to die naturally. People should be allowed to die naturally. And we shouldn't strive officiously to keep people alive who are naturally dying. But we can make people comfortable nowadays more than ever before. And especially on the Isle of Man, we have these fantastic services. And so I sympathise with the people who have seen some painful things in the past. But, if we allow them the right to kill themselves, then we think we're going to just make the vulnerable people coerced. It's just going to be so difficult.
So that was a look back at the assisted dying debate, one of the biggest news stories of the year, of course. And another, I would have to say, will probably be COVID-19, but definitely not in a way that it dominated the news in 2020, 2021, or even 2022. This year, very much a retrospective look at how governments handled the pandemic and the outcome of a certain tribunal. Because whilst COVID-19 lockdowns were a thing of the past, throughout the year we've heard about the treatment of the Isle of Man's former medical director, Dr. Rosalind Ranson, who was unfairly dismissed after raising concerns about the island's handling of the pandemic. Manx Radio's news editor Sian Cowper was covering the tribunal. Sian, you were there at the majority of the tribunal hearings in Douglas. Tell us what they were like and what it was like going in week after week and seeing the impact on Dr. Ranson herself and hearing some of the stories that she was telling.
Yeah, we heard a lot about the impact that it had on Dr. Ranson herself when they had the remedy hearing, which was all about trying to figure out essentially how much she was going to receive from the Department of Health and Social Care. We heard from a couple of psychologists who talked about the detrimental impact it had on her ability to return to work. They talked about the fact that she essentially would need years before she was well enough to return to some kind of normality for her. So it was really quite emotional hearing her testimony and just talking about the impact that it had had on her health, her well-being, all around her life had been affected by this. And we also heard essentially as well about the financial impact, which was a lot of what the remedy hearing was about her loss of future earnings, the pension, all of that sort of moulded into one. There was also as well the calculation around the damages paid out by the department and how their behaviour during the original tribunal, which we heard all about last year, how that had impacted her case during the tribunal.
And that final figure, £3.2 million, was that expected? Did you see that coming up? Was it mooted at any point throughout the tribunal hearings?
At various points, there were references to another tribunal, Sutton versus Creechurch, which before this tribunal was the record-breaking whistleblowing case. And the payout in that one was, I think, around about £500,000. I think we knew this was going to be a record-breaking payout. I think we probably would have said in advance that it would be into seven figures. 3.2 million, it did sound like a big number, but obviously you see the breakdown, the loss of salary, the pension, the damages. It does feel probably around about where we were expecting.
And simultaneously, as we were hearing about the impact on Rosalind Ranson herself and the ins and outs of the DHSC at the time and the development of Manx Care, it took us back to the start of the COVID pandemic. So there was a public interest in that regard and highlighted some of the decision-making around that time, didn't it?
Yeah, we certainly heard about, during the original tribunal itself, some things that had not been discussed in the public domain first time around. So you'll probably remember the vaccine rollout. When the UK and the Channel Islands started doing the vaccine, it didn't start over here around the same time. And at the time we were told it was something to do with the indemnity, it'll sort itself out. And it wasn't until the tribunal itself we heard that was all part of this dispute between Dr. Ranson and the now former chief executive at DHSC.
And then obviously looking into next year, we're going to have the results of a review basically into government's handling of the pandemic. Do you feel like a lot of those themes then that you've seen this year will crop up in that? Are you expecting any big surprises?
Difficult to say. We know that that's going to be published on the 8th of January next year, Kate Brunner KC's review. We're led to believe it's quite a long report, so I'm sure there will be lots of detail in there that we've not heard before. Exactly what's in it, I think we'll have to wait and see.
Do you then think overall the whole sort of Ranson debacle, as it were, is now concluded? Do you think that that's the last we'll hear of this?
When we last heard from the tribunal and they settled, there was a second claim of unfair dismissal. When they had settled that claim, the tribunal did say that Dr. Ranson reserves her right to pursue damages through other manners. We've not heard any more about that yet. There is still, I understand, one unresolved issue, which is around her legal expenses. So she was awarded 70% of her legal expenses by the tribunal. And there was some dispute over exactly how much of that she could claim for. In the early stages of the tribunal, her husband, who is a barrister, was representing her, and they couldn't quite decide how much of his time could be claimed for. So there is still some figuring out to be done there. Of course, that's on top of the £3.2 million that's already been awarded. So I think it is still set to rumble on for a little while yet. We know there is as well the second review as well, the one that was ordered in Tynwald more recently, so that one as well. Well, I'm sure we'll hear more from that in due course.
And when you look back then over 2023 and the progress of this tribunal and the kind of impact afterwards, we had FOI requests, digging up sort of past emails, etc. How do you compare the scope of this story, as it were, in a news sense compared to things we've had in the past?
I think in terms of one single news story, it's probably one of the biggest, certainly in my time here at Manx Radio, that we've dealt with in terms of, I think it goes back to May 2021, we first heard about this idea that Dr. Ranson had a grievance, a whistleblowing situation in the DHSC, and just the amount that it's dominated, particularly in sort of the political landscape as well, it's fairly unprecedented on the island.
Let's hear a bit from Dr. Rosalind Ranson when she appeared on BBC Radio 4 in recent weeks.
She was trying to break me, maybe trying to get me to lose my temper, maybe trying to just make me not be able to cope. It was setting me up to look as if I was failing.
In December 2020, the Isle of Man government got access to the global supply of vaccines, but the judges heard the medical director was sidelined by Catherine Magson. A problem arose, however.
She decided that she was going to lead the rollout of the vaccine. I was given instructions that I was not to be a part of that team. And then she realised that actually the legal process required me to literally sign a document. So suddenly she demanded that I sign the document. There were many things that were not in place to safely give this vaccine. So I just refused. And she was furious because she'd told the minister we're going to be ready to go, everybody's going to start receiving the vaccine. I felt relieved that they had found in my favour, but I was out of a job. It was the end of my career. It's been the most traumatic thing I'd been through. At no point has it felt like a success. And it's been very difficult to get back my life.
A little bit of a look back there about COVID-19 and that fallout from that tribunal here on the island. And while Sean kind of covered that extensively, it was definitely big news for all of us. I'm sure you'd agree, Lewis. Mm-hmm. And reporting on it was interesting, to say the least, especially in bulletins. We're often news reading and new stuff was coming up all the time.
A deeper insight into the ways of government departments than we normally get at any time of the year.
Absolutely, and it caused a lot of fallout for the Cannon government too. This year marked 2 years in office for our current crop of MHKs, and so I thought I'd have a little look back at how the administration is faring.
Polling stations for the 2021 House of Keys general election are now closed. Voters have spent the last 12 hours heading to the polls to pick who will serve in the House of Keys for the next 5 years.
Can you believe it's already been 2 years since a new crop of MHKs made their way into the oldest parliament in the world with an unbroken existence? Yep, 2 whole years since some now familiar names were knocking on your door asking for your vote to get them a seat in the House of Keys.
I am Daphne Kane, standing for Garth.
Hi, I'm Rob Callister and I'll be standing in the
Hi, my name's Joni Farragher and I'll be standing for Douglas.
Whilst on the campaign trail, they all made a lot of big statements about what they'd like to see if elected.
Number one priority is good delivery of mental and physical health.
Number one priority is common sense and accountability, so 2 priorities actually.
My number one priority will be working with colleagues to establish
all of the priorities that are hitting Tynwald, which includes climate change and power generation.
In the West, to sort out the sewage problem, we absolutely need to get rid of it.
For me, I want to really focus on getting the secondary legislation right on some of the big pieces of legislation we've already brought through. We need to absolutely...
Now's the time to knuckle down. The government's got a huge job on its hand, and indeed the parliamentarians have got a huge job on their hand over the next 5 years. COVID, as I said, climate change, housing, health waiting lists, hospitals, but also we've got to find the opportunities to push forward in this, and I do think there are many opportunities for this island. So I also go into this next administration with real optimism.
So now, 2 years on, how many of these things have actually been achieved? Government would argue many of the candidates' respective goals were accumulated into one document, which sets out its policies and sets the course for the longer-term delivery of its vision over the next decade and beyond. That document is often referred to by government. Come on, say it with me now. It's the
Island Plan.
This Island Plan.
Island Plan.
This Island Plan.
The Island Plan.
Our Island Plan.
When the Island Plan was approved by Tynwald back in February last year, Lewis went down to Strand Street to get the public's reaction.
Do you recognise this document? The Island Plan? Have you heard of the Island Plan?
No.
It sets out government's targets for the next 5 years and was voted through yesterday. Had you heard anything about it?
I haven't read the paper yet.
Great stuff. No.
Some would argue you could judge the island's parliament based on the number of acts promulgated on our national day. Last year, that figure stood at 19. But this year...
Now we're going to have the promulgation, just 4 laws to be promulgated, much less than normal.
OK, so what about the current legislation being actively worked on? Well, this administration certainly has several bills working their way through the island's parliament, including some looking at assisted dying, animal welfare and vaping products. Steering the island towards a greener future has been another key focus. The Department of Infrastructure, working in conjunction with Manx Utilities, are attempting to modernise how we get energy here on the Isle of Man, with grand plans for onshore wind turbines and solar panels to be installed on the public estate. DEFRA has confirmed around 2,000 homes have benefited from support as part of government's energy efficiency scheme. Elsewhere, work is ongoing to create a sexual assault referral centre, with the Department of Home Affairs hoping to get spades in the ground by the end of this year, and there are plenty of bold plans for the regeneration of brownfield sites. Perhaps we should judge an administration based on the stability of our Council of Ministers. Or, well...
Treasury Minister David Ashford has resigned.
Treasury Minister, the former Enterprise Minister, Alex Allenson, MHP.
Infrastructure Minister Chris Thomas is taking up the post after Tim Crookall was moved to the Department for Enterprise.
Tim Crookall stepped down from his role in Council of Ministers.
Rob Callister has been sacked as Health Minister.
There seems to have been more shuffles than Harlem in recent times.
Most recently, the Chief Minister stepped into the shoes of the Infrastructure Minister for a brief period, as Chris Thomas was sacked from the role. He has now since been replaced by Tim Crookall, who's returned to the job.
So from politics now to motorsport, and I don't want to go into too much detail because we'll have Manx Radio Sports Review of the Year coming up next with Rob Pritchard. But whilst we've got you, let's take a look back to this summer and TT 2023.
I want your shield. I want your weapon. Give me that bulletproof vest. And don't forget, I'm not susceptible.
Anyone on the Isle of Man for this year's TT Fortnight would have been lucky to escape without sunburn. It was perfect weather for racing.
And he is off. We are off and racing in the Isle of Man at the 2023 TT Festival. Welcome everybody on the hedges around the globe, wherever you are. Number 2, Dean Harrison.
But this year's event came with a controversial talking point. A new racing schedule which saw the senior TT take place on the final Saturday and the Superbike TT race on Sunday the 4th of June on the day historically dubbed as Mad Sunday. That didn't stop an estimated 43,000 visitors flocking to the island, though. Welcome trade for some of the Manx businesses at the TT Fan Park.
It's building up really nice and steady. It's been great for us. So it was quiet when we first got here, but now it's slowly building, and there is a real buzz building about the place.
Oh, it's incredible, like the profits you can make from just being here and having like a local business with, you know, all the tourists being around, all the locals as well. It's great to just be here.
It's been great up here. We've seen lots of friendly faces who, you know, we serve every year. It's been quieter mornings and then it's picked up throughout the day.
It's been absolutely amazing so far. It's really exceeded all of our expectations, and we're having a brilliant time. Sun's shining, and what more can we ask for? Yeah, it's awesome, absolutely awesome. So, just better than we expected.
So we've bought the motorbike from North Devon to Liverpool.
How long have you been here so far?
Since Tuesday.
And how have you found it?
Lovely. Weather is absolutely brilliant as well. Yeah, racing's great.
As a kid, I've always wanted to be here, and we decided last year to book it up, and we're here, and it's just like a dream come true.
And now, perhaps unsurprisingly, the racing fortnight did not pass without tragedy.
So far, it's a cloudy day ahead of Day 4's racing in TT23. But that's not all that is casting a shadow across the island. It's the loss of Spanish rider Raul Torres Martinez in the final lap of yesterday's Super Twin. He was 46 and made his debut in 2017, competing in 21 TTs. He was the fastest Spaniard ever on the TT course after a lap of 125.4 in the earlier race, the Superstop.
Come July and the Southern 100 returned to the Boulogne course. The event called off after an incident during a practice session on day 2 claimed the lives of 2 people, rider Alan Connor and Marshal Liam Clark. The remainder of the event called off. In August, the Manx Grand Prix came around, and again there were calls for a return to the old ways, a shorter schedule proving unpopular.
Trying to cram 2 weeks of what it was for 90-odd years into 9 days has been catastrophic. I mean, all the marshals, all the medics, the riders, they all, it's been a great event in some ways, but it's been let down by the organisation of it.
I think, it's a centennial of the Manx Grand Prix. We've been used for so long for having a 2-week format. It was reduced last year. I think everybody's expectations connected with the Manx that we go back to 2 weeks this year, and it hasn't happened, unfortunately. So that's a disappointment, but, it is what it is.
It didn't stop the event being one for the history books, though, with Manx rider Joe Yeardsley impressing the crowds on his debut, and we also saw someone arrested for flying a drone over the course.
A Manx Grand Prix visitor has been fined £3,000 for operating a drone close to the mountain course during the final race day at this year's event.
Again, though, tragedy, with riders Gary Vines and Ian Bainbridge killed during their pursuits around the Snaefell mountain course. So there we go, and as we say, Rob Pritchard back with a closer look at all the racing action around the mountain course and Boulogne this year. And of course in October we heard that an expanded 6-race programme for the Manx Grand Prix is being introduced for 2024. Siobhan, did you get out and about on the course this year?
Yeah, on the actual race days, I was in the news studio a lot of the time, actually. I was on bulletins pretty much all of TT, actually, I think. But I did get out on some of the practice days, and I still haven't quite gotten used to the speed at which they fly past you. I was always on kind of near Bray Hill, and it's kind of madness watching it happen.
I think I saw you at the bottom of Bray Hill during MGP. Was it the day after your wedding or the day before?
The day before my wedding. Yeah,
I did. The day before you were married.
I took my cousins who were over. We went and watched some of that. Yeah, absolutely.
Perhaps the biggest news story of the year, Siobhan's wedding, absolutely.
Well, yeah, exactly. For me, that's kind of the best news of the year. I won't recount all the details for everyone. However, yeah, a bit of good news doesn't go amiss. Should we have a look at some of the other good news things that happened on the Isle of Man this year?
I think we should, because we actually introduced onto the Manx Radio website the good news section for the first time this year, and it's been great to have a look back at all the different things that have happened just to lighten the soul a little bit for the end of the year.
Well, delighted to report that as of 2022, our waterways are excellent. 98% of our rivers are classified as excellent with regards to their chemical status. 82% are excellent for phosphates and 93% are good or excellent. So, we're kind of really doing well. There is some work to be done around reducing nutrient runoff in certain locations, but that's ongoing with landowners.
We're very proud of ourselves, and we'd like to thank everyone that donated. Everyone said I think it's for a good cause, and plus it's very easy to split that money.
Yeah, mixed emotions, like I say, yeah. But a sense of achievement, a satisfaction, and wonderful memories, yeah.
I know your message throughout this whole journey was to raise awareness about suicide
and
suicide prevention. Have you accomplished that?
I think we've raised the profile, yes. I think we've raised probably about £7,600 so far.
Oh, it's fantastic. The gardeners that we have no gardening experience. We try and teach them as much as we can without a qualification initially, but we have our garden that we do most of our root vegetables, which is run by the main prison A and B wing. So they provide the kitchen with the likes of potatoes, tomatoes, and other ground root vegetables, carrots, etc. And then we have one of the other wings that then supplies some of the more delicate vegetables.
You got it home, and at what point did you realise that you had potentially acquired something special?
I just thought I'd just have a little look and see if I could find anything the same on Google. So I sort of Googled that with there being no labels or anything on it. I think I might have done that, and then it brought up the information about the Epstein cloud sweep.
I'm Lara Howe, I'm the Marine Officer with the Manx Wildlife Trust.
So we're down in Fort Island today, and we're here for a few reasons, but first of all, we've had this kind of exciting new discovery on the island. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, one of our sea search snorkelers is a lady called Sue Harvey. They found 2 new isopod species new to the Isle of Man, and they were found in Castletown on some seaweeds at the beginning of the year. Sue's very keen, along with many of our other volunteers, and she's been doing quite a few sort of invertebrate type workshops and things like that. So she's already got her eye in, and what she did was she found some seaweed and just had a look through it and rinsed it through in a bucket of water to see what would sort of effectively fall off, and that's how she managed to find the isopods. So the first time they've been recorded, so it's very exciting.
I think it is wonderful, and I really, really mean this, that a small person like me, who's done nothing more really than do what he's passionate about, and have been given the opportunity to do what I'm passionate about, should be given some recognition. I've always preferred to think of myself more as like a Tonto type. I prefer to be the sidekick to the Lone Ranger rather than the boss.
When I think back, I mean, you don't do it really for the awards or rewards and recognition, but it is lovely to have some recognition, but you do it because it's part of your lifestyle and passion, and it's just been wonderful to be able to do it. So to have a recognition is an extra special thing.
Hello there, it's Ian Sanderson with another one of my exhibitions, one of many. This one is to raise funds for the RNLI, and this all came about because Manx Radio announced that on Saturday the 9th of July, last year that is, they were going to have the naming ceremony for the new Ramsey lifeboat. So I thought I'd go down because it's a social history, get some nice record photographs, that was all basically. So I went down, the light was amazing. So I took a lot of photographs, and then when I got home, I skimmed through them late in the day, and I thought, these look quite good. And I thought, they need some funds because the new lifeboat cost £2.5 million.
My mother-in-law actually has reminded us that our friend Andy had metal detector. So I gave him a little message, put a message on my metal detecting group, and someone kindly went out to have a little look with no avail, sadly. And then we had to wait till 3 p.m. basically, till low tide. And Andy very kindly lent us it. He was actually in England, and so he gave me all these directions into his garage, and we got the metal detector and headed out there. And we didn't really have much hope, to be honest, but I thought, give it a go, we're here now. And I couldn't believe it when it started beeping, and we found it just lying there, sat there in a little rock pool, just glinting under the sand.
I mean, the amazing thing is that we started with a handful of volunteers and thousands of pieces of plastic to pick up. We've still got thousands and thousands of pieces of plastic, but we've got thousands and thousands of volunteers. So it's not just fallen on a small number of people anymore, and everybody seems to want to be involved.
I used to be a school teacher, and I knew quite a few teachers who wrote poetry, and there's nothing unusual about that. But I was talking to a fellow who's a gardener, and he says, I write poetry. And a postman who writes poetry, and various other things. So it goes to show that poetry is for everyone. It's not just the people in their ivory towers of academia.
Ending the Manx Radio News Review 2023 with a look back at all the good news stories on the Isle of Man this year. That was at least the majority of the news from this year. We couldn't cover absolutely everything, of course. It would take hours.
Hours and hours. And you know what? You can do that anyway by listening to Manx Radio all year, because that's when we do cover these stories.
Or just go to the Isle of Man news section on the Manx Radio website and scroll away to your heart's content. And that's as done. Oh, Siobhan, we forgot to mention the bishop.
Oh, whatever. We'll do that next year.